They called me unworthy in their own dining room, smiling like it was kindness. Years later, I stood in their childhood house, holding the deed with my name on it. My father figure once measured my ceiling. Now he watched me redraw the neighborhood. I didn't argue. I acquired. The cicadas were screaming the night I signed the closing papers. Houston heat wrapped around me like wet fabric. My hands rested on a polished oak table inside a midtown title office. Across from me sat a notary with red lipstick and a silver stamp. On the folder in front of me was an address I knew by heart. A pale blue two-story in 3rd Ward. White shutters, cracked driveway. The house they grew up in. The house where they said I didn't belong. The house I now owned. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Alana Brooks. I'm 27 years old, and this is what really happened. The first time they called me unworthy, I was 17. Back then, the loudest sound in my life wasn't cicadas. It was metal bed frames scraping across linoleum floors. The women's shelter on Scott Street never really slept. Bunk beds groaned when someone turned over. Showers hissed behind thin doors. A baby cried almost every night at 2:13 a.m. I memorized the sound. Humiliation there didn't shout. It hummed. The air smelled like bleach and boiled rice. Fluorescent lights flickered above long folding tables. Plastic mattress covers stuck to my skin during August. My mom tried to make it feel temporary. "It's just a stop," she'd say, "not the destination." But temporary lasted longer than we thought. She lost her job at a dental clinic after the office downsized. 1 missed rent payment turned into 3. Eviction notice taped to our apartment door. A sheriff standing in the hallway with paperwork. Harris County Court document #2016 ET 90,421. Eviction executed. I still remember the deputy's boots on the stairs. The church group started visiting the shelter on Sundays. They brought donuts and pamphlets about scholarships. One of them was Jasmine. She was 22, polished, soft curls, gold cross necklace. She volunteered as a youth mentor. She looked at me like I was a project. One afternoon, she pulled me aside near the vending machine that never worked. "You're smart," she said, adjusting her blazer. "But you have to be realistic." "Realistic about what?" I asked. She smiled in that patient way people do when they think they know your limits. "Girls from places like this don't usually go far." I held her stare. She leaned closer. "You'll always be the girl from the shelter, Alana. Don't set yourself up for disappointment." The words didn't echo. They settled. Heavy, sticky, unworthy. That was the label. Not loud enough to report. Not cruel enough to confront. Just quiet enough to burrow into my spine. I graduated high school with honors. No one from the church showed up. Mom cried in the shelter cafeteria. I held her hand. We both pretended the folding chairs were auditorium seats. Houston summer pressed down on everything. Heat rose from the pavement like breath. I enrolled at Houston Community College because it was what we could afford. I worked 2 jobs, day shift at Target, night shift at a diner off I-45. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried grease. My uniform clung to my back. Tips went straight into a metal tin I kept in my backpack. Some nights, I didn't go back to the shelter. Curfew rules were strict. Miss too many, lose your bed. So I slept in my car. A silver Toyota Corolla with cracked leather seats. I parked behind a 24-hour gym. The AC rattled. The steering wheel burned my palms in the afternoon. I told myself it was strategy. Say faster, leave sooner. On campus, I studied business administration. Numbers felt neutral, honest. They didn't judge your zip code. One afternoon at Target, I was covering guest services when a woman came in complaining about her apartment lease. "I swear these landlords think we're stupid," she snapped, waving paperwork. After she left, I kept staring at the lease. Rent, $1,450. Late fee, $175. Security deposit, $1,450. I did the math in my head. Multiply that by 20 units. Something shifted. At the diner, I started asking questions to regulars. One of them, Mr. Alvarez, owned a small 4-unit building. "Real estate ain't glamorous," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "It's paperwork and patience." Paperwork didn't scare me. I started watching YouTube videos on tax lien auctions during my lunch breaks, learned about FHA loans, Section 8 vouchers, landlord-tenant law in Texas, Harris County small claims procedures, eviction timelines, notice requirements. Knowledge felt like armor. Jasmine didn't know I was studying property law at 2 a.m. in a car that smelled like gasoline and fast food wrappers. She didn't know I kept every receipt, every paycheck stub, every savings deposit. I opened my first bank account with $312. It felt like oxygen. 2 years later, Mom and I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Southeast Houston. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. No bunk beds, no curfew, just quiet. The first time I drove past Jasmine's family home after that, I slowed down. Pale blue siding, white shutters, basketball hoop in the driveway, cookout smoke drifting from the backyard. I had been there once, back in high school. A youth leadership dinner. They prayed before eating, talked about generational wealth. Her father had laughed when I mentioned wanting to study business. "Ambitious," he said, "but some ladders aren't built for everyone." They didn't yell. They didn't mock. They assessed, measured, found me lacking, unworthy. I sat in my car outside that house years later and stared at the brick mailbox with their last name etched in gold, and I made a decision. I wouldn't fight them. I would outlast them. At 23, I bought my first property, a duplex in a transitional neighborhood near the medical center. The paint was peeling, the fence leaned sideways, but the numbers worked. FHA loan, 3.5% down. County court record hash 2021 re 11,873 signed by notary public. I moved into Unit A, rented Unit B to a nursing student. The first rent check cleared, and I cried in my kitchen. Not loud, just steady. I refinanced 2 years later, pulled equity, bought another small property, then another. I learned to read credit reports like weather forecasts. I studied eviction laws like scripture. I built an LLC, Brooks Property Group. Every document was clean, every contract precise. By 27, I owned 7 doors across Houston. And then one afternoon, my realtor called. "Alana," she said, "you won't believe this." "What?" "You know that blue house on Elgin? It just hit foreclosure." My grip tightened around my phone. "Which one?" "The 2-story, white shutters. Families moving out of state." The cicadas outside my office window were loud that day. "How much?" I asked. She told me. The number didn't scare me. Silence filled the space between us. "You interested?" she asked. I looked at the framed LLC certificate on my wall. I thought about bunk beds, bleach, plastic mattresses. I thought about Jasmine's voice. Girls from places like this don't usually go far. I inhaled slowly. "Schedule the showing," I said. The house smelled different inside than I remembered. Less smoke, more dust. Sunlight pushed through half-closed blinds. Hardwood floors creaked under my heels. The kitchen island still had a faint knife mark near the sink. I walked through every room calmly, measured walls with my eyes, assessed repairs, calculated resale value. But under all that math was something older. A 17-year-old girl standing near a vending machine, being told who she would always be. Unworthy. I stood in what used to be Jasmine's bedroom. The walls were pale lavender now. I touched the window frame, felt the heat seeping through the glass. Not anger, not bitterness. Control. I made an offer that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I was back in the title office. Oak table, silver stamp. The notary slid the final page toward me. "Congratulations," she said. I signed my name in clean, deliberate strokes. Alana Brooks, owner. The cicadas outside were still screaming. This time, they sounded different. The first thing I noticed when I got the keys was the smell. Not the old dust, not the stale air, memory. It hung in the hallway like perfume that refused to fade. I stood alone in the entryway, the August humidity pressing through the front door behind me. Houston air doesn't knock, it pushes. The house felt smaller than it had years ago. Ceilings lower, walls closer, power different. I walked room to room slowly, not as a guest this time, but as the owner. The hardwood floors creaked beneath my heels. The sound echoed sharper than I remembered. Every step felt like a quiet announcement. Mine. I didn't celebrate. No champagne, no Instagram post, no group chat screenshot. I took photos for documentation, not nostalgia. Roof condition, window seals, plumbing fixtures, business first. Still. When I reached the kitchen island with the faint knife mark near the sink, my fingers brushed it without thinking. Flashback. Ambitious. Jasmine's father had said that night years ago. But some ladders aren't built for everyone. His wife had nodded softly. Not cruel, certain. That certainty used to shrink me. Now it fueled me. I called my contractor from the driveway. "It needs cosmetic updates," I said. "Floor polish, paint, new appliances. Keep the bones." "How fast you want it done?" he asked. 3 weeks? You moving in?" I looked back at the blue siding. "No, I'm repositioning it." That word mattered. Repositioning. I wasn't buying it to sit inside old ghosts. I was buying leverage. By the end of that week, foreclosure paperwork had been finalized. Previous owners officially vacated. Then Harris County foreclosure transfer record #2025 FT 44219. The title was clean. I kept it that way. Renovations began on a Monday. The smell of fresh primer replaced dust. Workers moved in and out with ladders and tool belts. The house hummed with purpose. While they worked, I reviewed rental comps across Third Ward. Market rates had climbed. Demand was strong. Gentrification is a complicated word. Profit is a clearer one. I set the monthly rent slightly below market. Not charity, strategy, high-quality tenants, stable income, fast occupancy. 3 days after listing, my property management portal started buzzing with applications. Each notification sounded like a soft chime, opportunity knocking. I screened them all personally. Income verification, background checks, rental history, credit scores, clean process, no emotion. Then I saw the name, Jasmine Reed. My hand froze on the mouse. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Age 32, marital status, divorced, employment, contract administrative assistant, credit score, recovering, current address, temporary rental, lease ending in 30 days. The air in my office felt thinner, not dramatic, just different. I clicked open the full report. There it was. Late payments, medical debt, a recent divorce filing, Harris County Family Court Case #2024 FD 90,811. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Life had repositioned her too. I could have denied the application immediately. Low credit history, debt ratio borderline, technically justifiable. But that wasn't what I wanted. Revenge isn't always removal. Sometimes it's elevation. I forwarded the file to my assistant. "Flag this one," I typed. "Send schedule showing for Friday at 2 p.m. No emojis, no commentary, professional." Friday arrived hot and heavy. The kind of Houston afternoon where sweat gathers at your collarbone. I wore a navy blazer, neutral lipstick, hair pulled into a sleek low bun, control in fabric form. I arrived early. The house looked transformed. Soft gray exterior, clean landscaping, windows gleaming. I stood inside the foyer, reviewing lease documents on my tablet. The front door opened. Footsteps. Measured. Slightly hesitant. "Hello?" a woman called. I stepped into the entryway. Jasmine stood there holding a leather tote and a folder of paperwork. She looked older, tired around the eyes, but still polished. For half a second, she didn't recognize me. "Hi," she said politely. "I'm here for the showing." I gave a small nod. "I know." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Recognition is a slow burn. "Alana?" she asked. "Yes." Silence settled between us. Not thick, not dramatic, just real. She straightened her shoulders. "You own this property?" she asked. "I do." A flicker crossed her face. Surprise first, then recalculation. "Well," she said carefully, "it's beautiful." "Thank you." I walked her through the house like any other applicant. This is the primary living area. New appliances, HVAC replaced last year, washer-dryer hookups. My voice was steady. Even. She trailed behind me, fingertips grazing the freshly painted walls. At one point, she paused in the hallway. "You've done well," she said quietly. It wasn't praise. It was assessment. I turned to face her. "I've been working," I replied. We stopped in what used to be her bedroom. The lavender paint was gone. Now it was soft white. She looked around slowly. "My parents sold it fast," she said. "Market's crazy right now." I didn't correct her. Foreclosure moves differently than selling fast. She didn't ask how I afforded it. She didn't mention the shelter. But I saw the memory flicker in her eyes. She remembered. The vending machine, the sentence. Girls from places like this don't usually go far. After the walkthrough, we stood in the kitchen. "I'd like to move forward," she said, pulling documents from her folder. "I can provide additional income statements if needed." I studied her face for a long second, not searching for apology, just clarity. "This property requires first month security deposit and renter's insurance," I said. "Lease term is 12 months, late fees in force at day 3. Professional, documented, clear." She nodded. "I understand." I handed her the preliminary approval form. Brooks Property Group, LLC, printed across the top. Her gaze lingered on the name. Something shifted in her expression then. Not humiliation, realization. She signed the application. I signed the approval. County lease registration #2025 LR 33081, notarized same day. As she gathered her papers, she hesitated. "Alana," she began. I met her eyes calmly. "I was young," she said. "I didn't always know how my words landed." I held her gaze. "You were certain," I said softly. The corner of her mouth tightened. Yes. Certainty had cost her, not publicly, quietly. "I hope this works out for you," I added. Not sharp, not sweet, neutral. She left the house with a copy of the lease in her tote bag. I locked the door behind her and stood alone in the foyer again. The cicadas were loud outside, but inside, it was quiet. Different from the shelter quiet. This quiet belonged to me. The lease started on the 1st of September. Houston heat still clung to the sidewalks, thick and relentless. Even at 9 a.m., the temperature pressed against the windows like a warning. I watched from my car as Jasmine pulled into the driveway with a rented U-Haul. No moving crew, no family caravan. Just her. The house looked different with her standing outside it. Smaller somehow. Less certain. She unlocked the front door slowly, like she was stepping into a memory she didn't fully control anymore. I didn't approach. Landlords don't hover. I drove away and let the paperwork do its job. 3 days later, the first rent payment hit my account. Direct deposit. On time. I stared at the confirmation notification longer than necessary. It wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. Years ago, I stood in that same house as a guest who didn't quite belong. Now her payment flowed through my LLC. Not revenge. Rebalancing. I went back to my office and pulled up the property dashboard. 7 properties. 8 tenants. 0 delinquencies. Brooks Property Group was stable. But stability has layers. That same week, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Alana Brooks?" a male voice asked. "Yes." "This is Pastor Reed," her father. The cicadas outside my window buzzed louder than usual. "I wanted to speak with you," he continued, "about the property." My tone stayed even. "The lease agreement is between Brooks Property Group and Miss Reed. Any concerns should go through her directly." A pause. "I'm aware," he said, "but I wanted to say something man to woman." I didn't correct him. "What is it?" I asked. "We always believed in hard work," he began. "And I see you've done well." There it was again. Assessment dressed as acknowledgement. "I have," I replied. Another pause. "I hope this arrangement doesn't feel personal." I looked at the framed foreclosure documents on my desk. Harris County Foreclosure Transfer Record, hash 2025 FT 44219. Personal wasn't in the paperwork. "It's business," I said calmly. He exhaled. "Understood." He hung up first. I sat there for a long moment staring at the wall. Some victories are loud. This one was administrative. Weeks passed. Jasmine kept the lawn trimmed, trash bins aligned neatly by the curb, no noise complaints, professional tenant. One Saturday afternoon, I drove by for a routine exterior inspection. Not inside, just visual compliance. She was sitting on the front steps with a laptop. For a second, it felt like time folding in on itself. She looked up when my car slowed. Our eyes met briefly. She stood. I parked. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Routine drive-by," I answered. "Checking property condition." She nodded. "It looks good," she said quietly. It does. The sun cast long shadows across the driveway. Heat shimmered off the asphalt. "You always wanted this," she said suddenly. I tilted my head slightly. "Wanted what?" "Ownership. Control." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was reflective. "I wanted security," I corrected. She looked back at the house. "My parents are renting in Katy now," she said. "Downsized." I didn't comment. Life rearranges everyone eventually. She closed her laptop slowly. "I was wrong about you," she added. Not dramatic, just direct. I held her gaze. "You were confident," I replied. She gave a faint, almost embarrassed smile. "Confident can be cruel." That sentence hung in the humid air. For a second, I considered telling her how those words shaped my decisions. How many nights I studied contracts because of one sentence near a broken vending machine. But explanations are a luxury. I didn't need one. "You're paid through October," I said instead. "Keep documentation for any maintenance requests. Professional. Clean." I drove off again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anger, because of perspective. I pulled out my old metal savings tin from the back of my closet. I kept it as a reminder. Inside were faded Target pay stubs, diner receipts, a folded shelter intake form, women's transitional housing intake hash 2017 to 2219. I ran my fingers over the paper. Paper-thin dignity. That's what it felt like back then. Now, dignity had weight. 2 months into the lease, an unexpected repair came up. Water heater failure. Jasmine submitted the maintenance request properly through the portal. No text messages, no emotional calls. I dispatched a plumber within 24 hours. Professional courtesy works both ways. When the repair invoice came in, I approved it without hesitation. Landlords who cut corners pay later. That evening, she texted. "Jasmine, thank you for handling it quickly." Me, "That's part of the agreement." Jasmine, "Still, thank you." Short, civil. I set my phone down. Power doesn't need commentary. Then, in early November, something shifted. I received a notice from my property tax attorney. The city had reevaluated several third ward properties due to rising market values. My portfolio was about to be reassessed. Higher taxes, tighter margins. Ownership always comes with new battles. I scheduled a meeting at the Harris County Appraisal District office. Fluorescent lights, long lines, paper tickets, buzzing numbers overhead. As I waited, I realized something important. Buying that house wasn't the end of anything. It was leverage. Real power is sustainability. When I walked out of that office after filing my protest paperwork, the air felt cooler than usual. Houston doesn't cool easily. Neither do I. Later that week, I received a message from Jasmine again. "Jasmine, my lease renewal options. When will they be sent?" I stared at the text. 12 months hadn't passed yet. But she was thinking ahead. "Security changes, people," I replied. Me. "Renewal terms will be issued 60 days before expiration. Standard increase applies." 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. Jasmine. I understand. She was learning the same lesson I once did. Nothing is permanent. Everything is documented. That night, I drove past the old shelter on Scott Street. The building looked the same. Fluorescent lights flickering inside. A girl stood near the entrance holding a plastic bag of clothes. 17, maybe 18. I didn't get out of the car, but I watched her for a long moment. No one is born unworthy. They're just told they are. And sometimes they believe it long enough to prove it wrong. Winter in Houston isn't dramatic. It doesn't snow, it doesn't howl. It shifts quietly. The air turns sharp in the mornings. Breath becomes visible for a few seconds before disappearing. Skin tightens under thin sweaters. By December, Jasmine had settled into the house like it was muscle memory. Christmas lights lined the porch railings. A wreath hung on the freshly painted door. She kept everything neat. I drove by one evening after a late meeting downtown. The house glowed warm against the cold air. For a second, I saw it as it once was. Family dinners, laughter, certainty. Then I saw it for what it was now. Asset. That same week, I received a certified letter. Return address, Reed and Associates Law Firm. My name printed clearly across the envelope. I slid it open carefully. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a request. Jasmine's father was attempting to negotiate a short-term buyback option. He wanted to discuss reacquiring the property at fair market value. I leaned back in my chair and read the letter again. He didn't call it regret. He called it opportunity. Attached was a proposed number, below market. Calculated? Confident? Some ladders aren't built for everyone. I let the memory surface. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up comparable sales data. If he wanted market value, I could give him market value, with appreciation. I forwarded the letter to my real estate attorney. Respond formally, I wrote. All negotiations through counsel. Clean, controlled. 2 days later, my attorney called. He's testing leverage, she said. They're assuming emotional attachment. I looked out my office window at the skyline. They're assuming wrong. We drafted a response. Brooks Property Group, LLC has no interest in divesting the property at this time. No insults, no commentary, just position. That evening, Jasmine texted again. Jasmine, my dad mentioned reaching out. I hope that doesn't complicate things. Me, it doesn't. A pause. Jasmine, he misses the house. Me, I respect that. I set my phone down. Missing something doesn't entitle you to it. A week later, she requested a meeting. In person, she added. I agreed. Neutral location. We met at a small coffee shop near Midtown. Indie music played softly overhead. The place smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. She looked composed, hair straightened, nails freshly done. You look well, she said when I sat down. So do you. We didn't order drinks. This wasn't social. She folded her hands on the table. I need to ask something directly, she said. Go ahead. Did you buy the house because of us? There it was. Not accusation. Curiosity. I considered my words carefully. I bought it because it was undervalued, I replied, and because I understood its future appreciation. She watched me closely. That's not what I meant. I held her gaze. I know. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You were hurt, she said finally. Yes. No drama. No trembling voice. Just fact. She nodded slowly. I was arrogant, she admitted. That word carried more weight than apology. I thought I was helping you by managing expectations, she continued. I didn't realize I was shrinking you. I leaned back slightly. Expectation management is different from limitation. She absorbed that. I see that now. Outside, so cars moved steadily down the street, life continuing, indifferent. I don't want to be your charity case, she added quietly. You're not, I said. You're a tenant. Clear boundaries. Professional. She exhaled slowly. Would you ever sell it back? Straight to the point. Not now, I answered. Ever? I thought about that 17-year-old version of me. The way her words felt like a ceiling. Ownership taught me something, I said carefully. Some spaces aren't meant to be returned. They're meant to be repurposed. Her eyes softened. That's fair. We stood at the same time. No hugs, no dramatic reconciliation, just acknowledgement. As we stepped outside, cold air brushed against my face. I underestimated you, she said before walking away. I didn't respond. Underestimation built my portfolio. January brought new pressure. Property tax reassessments came back higher than projected. Insurance premiums rose after a minor storm damage claim on another property. Margins tightened. Power requires maintenance. I spent nights reviewing spreadsheets, recalculating projections, adjusting reserve allocations. Real estate isn't revenge, it's responsibility. One evening, while reviewing rent rolls, I noticed something subtle. Jasmine had started paying 3 days early. Not required. Not requested, 3 days early. Security creates discipline. By February, her father's attorney sent another letter, this one more direct. Offer increased, still below my threshold. Attached was a personal note. We built that house with sacrifice. It carries history. I read it twice. History doesn't transfer ownership. Deeds do. County Property Title Registry, hash 2025, PR 55,209 listed Brooks Property Group, LLC, as sole owner. Paper beats nostalgia. I instructed my attorney to respond again. Firm, polite, final, no sale. That same night, Jasmine called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded different, tighter. My dad won't stop, she said. That's between you and him, I replied calmly. He thinks this is personal. It isn't, she hesitated. But was it? There it was again. The question under everything. I inhaled slowly. When someone tells you who you are, I said, you can either accept it or audit it. Audit it? She repeated softly. Yes, I audited the claim. It didn't hold. Silence, then a quiet laugh from her end. You're different, she said. I grew. We ended the call without resolution. But resolution wasn't required. Ownership is clarity. The following week, I visited the property for an annual interior inspection. Proper notice given, documentation prepared. The house felt warmer than before, lived in differently. New curtains, rearranged furniture, a small bookshelf near the stairs. She had made it her own. I checked smoke detectors, water lines, window seals, professional checklist. In the kitchen, she stood watching me. You're thorough, she said. I have to be. Does it ever get heavy? She asked. What? Carrying all of it. I looked around the room. Fresh paint, clean floors, stability. Heavy is unstable, I replied. This is balanced. She nodded. Before I left, she said something that stayed with me. You didn't just buy a house, she said. You rewrote a sentence. I paused at the doorway. Maybe she was right. But I didn't buy it to prove her wrong. I bought it because I could. March came with rain, not dramatic storms, just steady sheets that soaked the city without warning. The streets in Third Ward glistened under gray skies, reflecting power lines and traffic lights in warped streaks. Rain has a way of exposing weaknesses, roof seams, foundation cracks, drainage flaws. Ownership means you notice all of it. One Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m. Jasmine. There's water coming through the ceiling in the upstairs hallway. No panic in her message. Just observation. I was already out of bed. Send photos, I replied. 3 images came through. A faint brown circle expanding through white paint. Slow drip. Controlled, but spreading. I called my contractor immediately. Emergency patch today, I said. Full inspection after the rain clears. By 9:30 a.m., I was standing inside the house again. The smell of damp drywall hung in the air. Subtle, unsettling. The upstairs hallway felt smaller than usual. Jasmine stood near the staircase, arms folded. Not defensive, just watching. Thank you for coming quickly, she said. Water doesn't wait, I replied. The contractor climbed into the attic. Boots thudding softly overhead. Insulation shifted. Hammer taps echoed through the beams. We stood below in quiet proximity. This house always leaked during storms, she said suddenly. My dad used to climb up there himself. I glanced toward the ceiling. Deferred maintenance costs more later, I said. She gave a faint nod. That sounds like you? It was. By noon, the temporary repair was done. Leak contained. Permanent fix scheduled. I signed the service invoice on my tablet. Professional. Efficient. Before leaving, I paused near the hallway wall where water had stained the paint. Rainwater doesn't ask who used to live there. It only follows gravity. That afternoon, I received another message from my attorney. Reed and Associates had officially withdrawn their buyback inquiry. No further negotiations requested. I stared at the email for a long moment. It wasn't victory, it was acceptance. Some doors close when persistence fails. Later that week, I attended a small real estate networking event downtown. Glass walls, soft jazz playing in the background, conversations about cap rates and zoning updates. A woman in a cream blazer approached me. You're Alana Brooks, right? She asked. Yes. I've heard about your Third Ward acquisition. Smart timing. Word travels in investment circles. Thank you, I replied. Are you holding long term? She asked. I don't flip memories, I said evenly. I build portfolios. She smiled. Impressive. That word felt different from how it did at 17. Back then, impressive was conditional. Now it was earned. When I returned home that night, I checked my property dashboard. All units paid, 0 outstanding maintenance requests, margins tight but stable. Rain had stopped. The city felt rinsed. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. Jasmine requested a modification meeting, not about repairs, about extension. She arrived at my office instead of meeting at the house, neutral ground. She sat across from me, posture straight but relaxed. I'd like to discuss renewing early, she said. Your lease expires in 6 months, I replied. I know. Her fingers tapped lightly against her folder. I'm applying for a promotion. Stability in housing strengthens my case. I listened carefully. Professional tenants think ahead. What term are you requesting? I asked. 2-year renewal. That was significant. 2 years is commitment. Rent will adjust to market, I said calmly. I expected that. She met my eyes steadily. I don't want to move again. There was no entitlement in her voice, just fatigue. Moving drains people, emotionally, financially. I'll review the numbers, I said. She nodded. Before standing, she added something softer. My dad stopped asking. I didn't respond immediately. Good, I said finally. She left without lingering. That night, I reviewed appreciation projections for the property. Third Ward development plans showed steady upward momentum. Holding long-term made sense. So did stability. I drafted a 2-year lease renewal at adjusted rate. Fair, competitive, documented. When I emailed it to her, she signed within the hour. County lease renewal filing hash 2026 LR 77104. The extension solidified something deeper than tenancy. It closed a loop. In April, I hosted a small cookout at my own home. Just close friends. Music playing low. Plates balanced on laps. My friend Nia leaned toward me while flipping burgers. So you own her childhood house? She whispered. Yeah. And she's paying you? Yes. Nia shook her head slowly. That's poetic. It's structural, I corrected. She laughed. You're different now. Growth changes cadence. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I stepped away from the noise and checked my phone. A deposit notification. April rent. On time. Again. Consistency builds trust. Not friendship. Not intimacy. Trust. The kind backed by paper. In early May, I visited the shelter again. Not announced. Not for charity. I brought a stack of informational pamphlets about first-time homebuyer programs, FHA guidelines, credit repair workshops. I left them at the front desk. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The same plastic mattress covers crinkled faintly down the hallway. The air still smelled like bleach. Some things don't change quickly, but access can. As I walked back to my car, I felt something settle inside me. Not pride, not revenge. Definition. I was never unworthy. I was undercapitalized. There's a difference. That weekend, I drove past the blue house again. Jasmine was watering the front lawn, hose stretched across the grass. She looked up as I slowed. This time, she smiled first. Not hesitant, not guarded, just aware. I nodded once, then kept driving. Ownership doesn't require applause. It requires maintenance, and I was just getting started. By June, Houston heat turned aggressive. Not warm, not humid. Aggressive. Sidewalks shimmered by 10 a.m. car handles burned skin. Air felt heavy enough to chew. Summer exposes endurance. It also exposes ambition. My portfolio had grown to 9 doors by then, a mix of duplexes and single-family homes scattered across 3rd Ward, Midtown, and one near East Downtown. Growth looks impressive on paper. It feels different in practice. More calls, more maintenance, more responsibility. One afternoon, I received a notice from my property management software. Potential zoning change, 3rd Ward redevelopment proposal. I clicked immediately. City Council Agenda #2026 URD 224, mixed-use rezoning discussions. If passed, property values in that corridor would surge. The blue house sat directly inside the projected expansion zone. My chest didn't tighten. It recalibrated. I called my attorney. Monitor that council session, I said. I want minutes, voting breakdown, and timeline projections. Strategic ownership requires anticipation. That evening, Jasmine texted. Jasmine, do you follow city development updates? Me, I do. Jasmine, my coworker mentioned rezoning near here. Me, it's under review. 3 dots appeared. Jasmine, if values rise, would that change anything? There it was. Fear disguised as curiosity. Me, lease terms remain intact. No emoji, no reassurance, just fact. Power isn't about unpredictability. It's about reliability. 2 weeks later, City Council approved preliminary rezoning expansion. Applause echoed inside the chamber, according to the livestream replay. On paper, my equity increased overnight. In real life, nothing changed immediately. But perception shifted. I drove by the property that weekend. The air felt hotter than usual. Jasmine was sitting on the porch steps again, this time with a folder in her lap. She stood when I approached. I saw the vote, she said. So did I. Her eyes searched my face. Are you going to sell? Direct. I appreciated that. No, I replied. She exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure. Why? Because now it's worth more. I tilted my head slightly. Value doesn't require liquidation. She absorbed that. You always think 3 steps ahead, she said. I learned to. She nodded slowly. I'm up for that promotion next month, she added. Housing stability helped. That's good. The heat pressed down around us. Cicadas screamed from the trees again, relentless. Alana, she said, voice softer. Do you ever miss before? Before what? Before everything became structured. I considered her question carefully. Structure is what saved me. I miss nothing about instability, I said calmly. She gave a small smile. That tracks. Later that week, something unexpected happened. I received a formal invitation. Reed Family Foundation Annual Community Banquet. Location, a hotel ballroom downtown. Dress code, business formal. My name was printed neatly on the card. I stared at it for a long time. Years ago, I sat at their dining table feeling measured. Now they were inviting me as a recognized local property owner. Public repositioning. I called Nia. You going? She asked immediately. I'm deciding. You have to, she insisted. That's narrative closure. Closure isn't something I chase, but positioning is. The banquet night arrived heavy with heat and humidity. Downtown lights shimmered against glass buildings. Valet attendants moved quickly under soft gold lighting. I stepped out of my car wearing a tailored black dress, minimal jewelry, hair smooth and precise, controlled. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with low conversation and silverware clinking against china. I saw Pastor Reed near the podium. He saw me. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Recognition, adjustment. I approached calmly. Good evening, I said. Alana, he replied. Thank you for coming. His voice was careful now, measured. I appreciate the invitation. We stood there for a second too long. Then Jasmine appeared beside him. She looked confident, composed. "You look amazing," she told me quietly. "So do you." Dinner progressed with speeches about community growth and generational wealth. Irony has a subtle sense of humor. Midway through the evening, Pastor Reed stepped to the podium. "We must support young entrepreneurs in our neighborhoods," he said, "especially those who redefine possibility." His eyes flickered toward me briefly. Public recalibration. Applause filled the room. Not for me directly, but adjacent. Afterward, several guests approached. "You're the investor who acquired Elgin Street, right?" "Yes." "Smart move. Impressive foresight." "Impressive again. This time, no condition attached." Jasmine joined me near the dessert table. "My dad isn't used to being outmaneuvered," she said quietly. "I didn't compete," I replied. She looked at me carefully. "That's the thing." Later that night, as I drove home, the skyline lights blurred slightly against the windshield. I thought about 17-year-old me sitting near a broken vending machine. Paper-thin dignity. Now I carried equity statements in my glove compartment. Security thickens your posture. A week after the banquet, Jasmine received her promotion. She texted me the news. "Jasmine, I got it." Me, "Congratulations." Jasmine, "Stability mattered." Me, "Good. Short, professional." But something had shifted beneath the surface. The power dynamic wasn't tense anymore. It was settled. In July, I finalized refinancing paperwork on 2 properties to leverage appreciation. County refinancing record #2026 RF 88,192. Capital reinvested, portfolio expanding. As I signed the documents, I realized something important. Buying that house wasn't the peak. It was a pivot. Some people chase revenge for applause. I chased position, and position compounds. August returned with weight, not just heat. Weight. The kind that settles on your shoulders when everything you built begins to draw attention. By late summer, the Third Ward redevelopment plans were no longer just projections. Survey crews started marking sidewalks with neon paint. Construction notices were taped to light poles. Change had a soundtrack now. Jackhammers, engines, distant metal grinding against metal. I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my email pinged with a subject line that made me pause. Community Advisory Board nomination, Third Ward redevelopment. I opened it slowly. My name had been submitted for consideration. Not by me, by Pastor Reed. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. The same family that once measured my ceiling was now elevating my seat at the table. Politics isn't loud. It's calculated. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I pulled the city council minutes from the previous zoning meeting, reviewed attendance, voting patterns, public comments. Positioning requires awareness. Later that afternoon, Jasmine called. "I wanted to tell you before you heard it somewhere else," she said. "I already saw it." A soft exhale. "My dad thinks you'd be good for the board." "I see. He respects what you've built. Respect comes late sometimes." "Does he?" I asked evenly. "Yes." There was no sarcasm in her tone, just fact. "I haven't accepted," I said. "Why not?" I stared at the city skyline through my office window. "Because power that invites you isn't always power that protects you." Silence. "You don't trust it," she said. "I trust documentation," I replied. She laughed softly. "You've always been like that." "Not always. I learned to be." That weekend, I drove past the blue house again. Construction noise echoed down the block. A new coffee shop had opened 2 streets over. The neighborhood felt different. Rising, I parked this time. Jasmine was sitting on the porch steps, laptop open, hair tied back loosely. "You look busy," she said. "Always." I sat on the edge of the porch railing. Not inside. Never inside unless necessary. "They nominated you," she said again. "Yes." "You should take it." "Why?" "Because you understand both sides." I raised an eyebrow. "Which sides?" "Where you started and where you are." Her words landed differently than her old ones. No ceilings now, just acknowledgement. "I don't need a title to influence development," I said calmly. "But you could protect people," she added. Then that word lingered. Protect. I thought about the girl outside the shelter months ago. Plastic bag of clothes, uncertain eyes. Protection isn't emotional. It's structural. I'll consider it, I said finally. She smiled. Progress. That Monday, I met with my attorney and financial advisor. Public board positions come with scrutiny, my advisor warned. Asset transparency, political exposure. I don't fear exposure, I said. I fear misalignment. We reviewed risk assessments for an hour. Strategic growth demands calculation. That night, I sat alone in my living room reviewing my journey on paper. From women's transitional housing intake hash 2017 to 2219 to county property title registry hash 2025 PR 55209. From borrowed beds to equity lines, there's a difference between revenge and recalibration. I chose recalibration. 2 days later, I accepted the nomination conditionally. I required written clarification of board authority and decision-making influence. Documentation first. Approval came quickly. My first advisory meeting was scheduled for early September. When I arrived at City Hall, the air conditioning blasted cold against my skin. Long polished tables filled the conference room. Microphones sat evenly spaced. I took my seat calmly. Across the table sat developers, city planners, and 2 longtime neighborhood advocates, and Pastor Reed. He nodded when our eyes met. No tension, just awareness. The meeting focused on affordable housing protections during redevelopment. I listened more than I spoke. Then, when it was my turn, I leaned into the microphone. If we're discussing growth, I said evenly, we must also discuss displacement. Asset appreciation without tenant stability is extraction, not development. The room stilled, measured silence. I continued. Mandatory tenant notification periods, rent cap guidelines for designated transition zones, property tax relief for legacy homeowners. Not emotional, practical, documentable. When I finished, several board members nodded slowly. Pastor Reed watched me carefully. Later, as we exited the building, he approached. You speak well, he said. I prepare well, I replied. A faint smile crossed his face. I misjudged you years ago. I met his gaze steadily. Yes, no softening, no bitterness, just fact. He nodded once. Fair. That word felt like closure, not apology, not redemption. Fair? That evening, Jasmine texted. Jasmine, I watched the live stream. Me. And? Jasmine, you didn't just buy the house. Me. No. Jasmine, you're redesigning the neighborhood. I paused before responding. Me. I'm protecting leverage. She sent a small laughing emoji. Growth looks different when it's not defensive. Over the next few weeks, I attended 3 more advisory meetings, pushed for tenant protections, proposed phased tax adjustments, developers negotiated, compromise emerged. Nothing perfect, but better than before. Meanwhile, rent payments continued on schedule. September, October, November. On time, consistent, power stabilized. One afternoon in late October, I visited the shelter again. This time, I asked to speak with residents about credit repair basics. Small group, folding chairs, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The same sound from years ago. I stood at the front of the room, calmly. You are not your starting point, I told them. A few women looked up sharply. Documentation builds doors, I added. Emotion doesn't. Quotable. True. After the session, a young girl approached me. How do you stop feeling small? She asked quietly. I held her gaze. You build something bigger than the voice that shrank you. She nodded slowly. I left without asking her name. Some things aren't about recognition. They're about structure. That night, as I drove home through warm autumn air, I realized something. The house wasn't just a purchase anymore. It was leverage for something wider. They called me unworthy, so I bought the house. And then I bought influence. November settled softly over Houston. Not cold enough for coats, just cool enough for intention. The city looked sharper in that light. Brick buildings deeper. Sidewalk cracks more visible. change more defined. Development had moved from proposal to construction. Framing crews worked 2 blocks from the Blue House. New signage advertised luxury townhomes starting in the 600S. I watched it all like a chessboard. Position matters more than speed. At the advisory board meetings, debates grew louder. Longtime residents feared displacement. Developers pushed timelines. City officials measured optics. I didn't argue. I calculated. During one session, a developer leaned across the table. "Appreciation benefits everyone," he said confidently. "Not equally," I replied. Silence followed. Not dramatic, measured. I placed a printed spreadsheet on the table. Median rent increase over 5 years versus median income growth in this district, I said evenly. The gap is structural. Paper doesn't raise its voice. It wins quietly. After the meeting, Pastor Reed approached me again. "You're shaping more than policy," he said. "You're shaping narrative." "I'm correcting math," I replied. He studied me for a moment. "You're not angry anymore." That statement lingered. "I was never angry," I said calmly. "I was aware. Awareness matures differently than anger." That weekend, Jasmine invited me to step inside the house for the first time since closing. "I repainted the study," she said over text. "You might appreciate it." I hesitated. Landlords don't socialize in tenant spaces, but curiosity isn't weakness. I agreed. The house felt different stepping through the front door this time. Warm, lived in, intentional. The lavender memory had been replaced with soft earth tones. Framed certificates hung on the wall. A small desk sat near the window. She had made it productive. "I got the promotion," she said again, this time with paperwork on the table. "Permanent salary increase." "Good," I replied. "I wanted you to see something." She handed me a printed document. "Pre-approval letter, mortgage inquiry." I looked up slowly. "You're buying?" I asked. "Trying." Her voice wasn't defensive, just honest. "In a different neighborhood," she added quickly. "Not here." I nodded once. "That's growth," she smiled faintly. "I used to think ownership was inherited," she said. "Now I know it's learned." That sentence stayed with me. We stood in the kitchen where I once felt evaluated. Now we stood as 2 women who understood leverage. "You never humiliated me," she said quietly. "I didn't need to." She laughed softly. That's the part that changed everything. Power without cruelty unsettles people more than revenge ever could. December approached with holiday lights and rising equity reports. My tax protest from earlier in the year resulted in a modest adjustment. Margins stabilized again. Brooks Property Group expanded to 10 doors after I closed on another duplex near Midtown. County closing record, #2026CL 99204, Momentum Compounds. Right before Christmas, I received another call from Pastor Reed. "I wanted to invite you to speak at our youth finance workshop," he said. The irony wasn't lost on me. "You want me to speak?" I asked evenly. "Yes." "About what?" "Asset building, discipline, strategy." He paused. "And resilience." I thought about 17-year-old me, bleach in the air, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "You'll always be the girl from the shelter." I agreed to speak. The workshop was held in the same church hall where years ago I sat quietly near the back. This time, I stood at the podium. Teenagers filled folding chairs, some restless, some attentive. I didn't soften my voice. "Credit is leverage," I said. "Debt is not shame. It's data. Learn how to read it." I saw Jasmine in the back row, watching. "Ownership isn't emotional," I continued. "It's strategic." I paused. "And no one decides your ceiling except you." A few heads lifted sharply at that. After the workshop, a young girl approached me. "My mom says we're stuck," she said quietly. "The stuck is temporary," I replied. "Uninformed is optional." Quotable. True. As I stepped outside into the cool December air, I felt something settle deeper than revenge. Repositioning. The Blue House remained occupied. Rent paid early again that month. But something else shifted. Jasmine's mortgage pre-approval strengthened. Her savings increased. Her confidence steadied. She wasn't dependent. She was transitioning. One evening she called. "I made an offer," she said. "On a house?" "Yes." "Congratulations." "It's smaller," she added, "but it's mine." I leaned back in my chair slowly. Ownership spreads. "Good," I said. "If it closes, I'll be out before my lease ends." "Provide notice per agreement," I replied. She laughed. "Still structured?" "Always." We ended the call without sentiment, but the air felt lighter. I realized something important. The house I bought to reclaim power had become a bridge. Not just for me. For her, too. They called me unworthy, so I bought the house. And then I turned it into proof. January arrived clean. No fireworks, no declarations, just cool air and new paperwork. Jasmine's official 60-day notice came through the tenant portal on January 3rd. Proper format, proper timing. Notice of intent to vacate. Lease ID hash 2026 LR 77104. Professional until the end. I read it once, then archived it. Transitions don't require emotion. They require coordination. Her mortgage had cleared underwriting. Closing scheduled for mid-February. I didn't ask for the address. Ownership isn't surveillance. 2 weeks later, she requested a final walkthrough date. I scheduled it for the last week of her tenancy. The morning of the inspection, the sky was pale gray. Not stormy, just muted. The house felt different when I stepped inside. Half-packed boxes lined the living room walls, curtains already taken down. Nail holes exposed where frames once hung. Spaces look honest when emptied. Jasmine stood in the kitchen holding a folder. "Everything's documented," she said, handing me maintenance receipts and utility confirmations. I nodded. We walked through room by room. No damages beyond normal wear. Floors intact. Walls clean. Professional tenant. When we reached the upstairs hallway, I paused near the ceiling where the water stain once spread. Repaired? Repainted? Seamless? "Funny," she said quietly, noticing where I was looking. "That leak felt catastrophic at the time." "Most things do," I replied. She smiled faintly. We moved into the old bedroom, once hers, then neutral white, then hers again. Now empty. The afternoon light spilled through the window, casting long shadows across bare floors. "I signed yesterday," she said softly. "On your house?" "Yes." She hesitated. "I wanted you to know." I met her eyes steadily. "I'm glad." Silence settled between us. Not awkward, not heavy. Complete. "I used to think you bought this to make a point," she admitted. "I did," I said calmly. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "But not to you," I continued. "To myself." She absorbed that. "That makes sense." We walked back downstairs together. At the front door, she handed me the keys, cold metal against my palm. "I meant what I said," she added. "You rewrote the sentence." I looked at the blue siding through the open doorway. "No," I replied softly. "I audited it." A small laugh escaped her. "Still structured." "Always." She stepped off the porch and into the driveway, where her car was waiting. Boxes stacked inside. New beginning packed tightly. She paused before opening the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "you were never unworthy." I held her gaze. "I know." She nodded once, then got in her car and drove away. No dramatic farewell. No tears, just movement. I stood alone in the doorway for a moment before closing it behind me. The house felt hollow. Not sad, reset. I began preparing it for the next phase. Fresh paint where needed. Minor touch-ups. Professional cleaning scheduled. This time, I didn't rush to relist. Instead, I reviewed long-term strategy. The redevelopment project had advanced further than expected. Property values climbing steadily, investor interest rising. I received 3 unsolicited offers within a month, all above what I paid. One nearly double. I read each email carefully, calculated net gain after capital gains tax, considered portfolio diversification. Then I closed my laptop. Not yet. Position is stronger when held at the right moment. Late February brought clear skies and crisp evenings. I attended another advisory board session. Affordable housing protections had officially been codified into local policy, partly shaped by the proposals I introduced months ago. Tenant notification timelines extended, tax relief brackets adjusted, nothing revolutionary, but measurable. As the meeting adjourned, Pastor Reed approached me once more. "You stayed," he said. "Yes." "You could have cashed out." "Yes." He studied me for a long second. "Why?" I didn't hesitate. "Because influence compounds differently than profit." He nodded slowly. "I underestimated you." I met his gaze evenly. "Yes." Not bitterness, just fact. He exhaled through his nose, almost amused. "Fair." We parted without further commentary. That night, I drove past the old shelter again, fluorescent lights still buzzing behind thin windows. A girl stood near the entrance, holding a phone and scrolling through something intensely. I didn't know her story, but I knew this. Starting point isn't destiny. I drove home through streets that looked different than they did 10 years ago. New cafes, new signage, new developments rising, and in the center of it all, a pale blue house with white shutters. Still mine. They called me unworthy, so I bought the house they grew up in, and I kept it. March came back around quietly. 1 full year since I signed the closing papers. Houston air carried that early spring softness. Not cool, not heavy, just balanced. Balance is earned. I stood in the driveway of the blue house again, but this time there were no tenants inside. No boxes, no wreaths, no borrowed history. Just clean lines and open possibility. The lawn had been reseeded, the shutters repainted, the hardwood floors refinished after Jasmine moved out. It looked sharper than it ever had. Ownership matures over time. Inside, sunlight poured through wide windows, cutting long gold shapes across empty rooms. The house no longer felt like memory. It felt like leverage. Over the past year, redevelopment had accelerated. New restaurants opened nearby. A boutique hotel broke ground 3 blocks away. My phone buzzed twice before noon with investor inquiries. One message stood out. Cash offer. No contingencies. Close in 21 days. The number was strong. Very strong. I sat at the kitchen island, the same one with the faint knife mark that survived every repaint, and ran the math. Purchase price, renovation costs, carrying expenses, projected appreciation, capital gains tax, net position. The profit would nearly double my liquidity, enough to expand into multifamily units, enough to scale beyond single-family portfolios, enough to reposition again. I closed my laptop slowly. Revenge asks for spectacle. Power asks for timing. That afternoon, I scheduled a private showing with a commercial broker. Professional attire, polished shoes, controlled cadence. He walked through the property with impressed silence. "Prime corridor," he said finally. "You held at exactly the right moment." "I don't rush exits," I replied. He nodded. "Are you ready to move it?" I looked around the living room one more time. Years ago, I stood in this house as a guest who felt measured. Now I stood as the owner deciding its future. "Yes," I said calmly. "List it." The contract moved fast. Inspection clean, appraisal strong, cash buyer confirmed, county court record hash 2027 SL 44102, signed by notary public. On closing day, cicadas weren't screaming. Birds were. Light filtered softly through the title office blinds, different table, different notary, same deliberate signature. Alana Brooks, seller, owner, strategist. When the funds cleared, I didn't celebrate loudly. I transferred capital into a newly structured acquisition account. Target, 12-unit multifamily near Midtown. Higher scale, higher influence. Compounded position. Later that week, I received a message from Jasmine. "Jasmine, I heard you sold it. News travels." Me. "Yes." Jasmine. "Was it hard?" I considered the question carefully. Me. "No." 3 dots appeared. Jasmine. "You don't get attached." Me. "I get strategic." She sent a small laughing emoji. Jasmine. "I'm closing on mine next Friday." Me. "Congratulations." Jasmine. You changed more than you know." I didn't respond immediately. Sometimes growth doesn't need commentary. A few days later, I drove past her new house. Not out of curiosity, out of alignment, smaller, modest, clean brick exterior, fresh landscaping. Her name would be on that deed. Ownership multiplies. That evening, I visited the shelter one more time. Not to speak, not to distribute pamphlets, just to sit in the parking lot for a moment. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. The doors still opened and closed with quiet routine. I remembered the plastic mattress covers, the creak of bunk beds, the way bleach clung to everything. Paper-thin dignity. Now, dignity had documentation. From Women's Transitional Housing Intake, hash 2017 to 2219, to County Property Title Registry, hash 2025, PR 55209 to County Court Record, hash 2027 SL 44102, a full arc. They called me unworthy. They said some ladders weren't built for everyone. They assumed ceilings were permanent. They measured me with small rulers. So I built bigger rooms. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't mock them. I didn't even confront them. I acquired position. Then I expanded it. Here's what I learned. Silence compounds when it's disciplined. Documentation outlasts doubt. And equity is louder than ego. The house they grew up in was never about walls. It was about proof. Proof that starting point isn't destiny. Proof that labels expire. Proof that power doesn't shout. It signs. As I drove home through warm Houston air, I passed new construction cranes lifting steel into the sky. Growth everywhere. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. I pulled into my driveway at my own home and stepped inside. No bunk beds, no borrowed space, no ceilings assigned by someone else's certainty, just ownership. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.